Tottenham Hotspur have appointed Thomas Frank as their new head coach.
And the consistency and the players know the patterns. But of course I'm aware that we need to be flexible sometimes.
You look what Thomas Frank has done over the course of 7 highly successful years, you can understand why Tottenham would be interested.
Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astedka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 244, a season preview, if you will, because the games are going to start counting now. All the preseason on the men's side is out of the way, and we are going to get some real football starting this week, including a Super Cup matchup with PSG. We've got Scott alongside to talk about it. He's back. He's at Scott G. Bird. Scott, what's going on, my friend?
Chilling. I can't believe that there's actual football matches. It doesn't seem like it should already be that time, but I think it was a jam-packed summer, whether you were watching all the football or not, right? I think we all stayed busy, and here we are with an absolute Mount Kilimanjaro to climb on Wednesday against PSG, but I'm looking forward to it.
It should be something. It'll be something. I was going to say fun, but then I rethought that right immediately. Caroline is also here. She's at CG Stefco. Caroline, how's your Sunday?
It's been pretty chill. I feel like I've been in a bit of an existential crisis ever since Sonny announced he was leaving, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, I want to start there because, we did talk obviously at length about Sonny leaving last week because we knew it was coming. We knew all the details. Scott was not with us last week, so I want to let him chime in. But man, I just want to start off by saying the content this week was directed directly at all of our hearts, and it was heart-wrenching to some extent. It was beautiful in a lot of ways. It was poetic in a lot of ways. It was cinematic in a lot of ways, which I guess is fitting for Sonny heading to LA, and obviously made his debut on Saturday against Chicago for LAFC and contributed right away. It was kind of awesome. But also like it still is. I'm still kind of coming to grips with all the content we saw this week and the messages that he had, not only for his teammates and the club, but specifically for the fans. And it was really something to behold. Scott, like I said, you were not with us last week and haven't really been able to react to Sonny's departure at all. So I want to kind of give you the floor and let you say what you want to say about it.
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying, for whatever reason, maybe it's because I was on vacation, right? But it didn't really hit me right away. I had a little bit of a delayed reaction to all of this, and I don't know, I maybe get a little less attached to individual players, right, than I should at times. But it was the club put out that video of Sonny penning a letter to the club and then reading it, right? And that's when it kind of hit me that Son was leaving, and turned into a conversation with my crew up in Seattle, with Seattle Spurs, right? Just about Sonny and the magnitude where it all just started kind of crashing down. I think, on the footballing side, I don't have any qualms with the decision. I don't think Sonny is going to fit the system any more than he fit the Ainge system, and he's 33, and which is crazy. I cannot believe he's 33 years old. And I'll pause for a second. Someone brought this up. My buddy Max up in Seattle brought this up to me. But Sonny's Champions League, just I can't think of a good enough word here, but what he did in the Champions League in the run in 2019, that was only his third or fourth season. And now he's been here for 10 years because 2020 to now is just like a time warp, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy to me that he did that so early in his decade at Spurs, right? I just mentally think of that as happening towards the end, right? Everything he's done for the club. So it's been a wild ride with Sonny. But I think with him, it's more about what he did off the field, right? I say from an on-field perspective, it makes sense in its time, but off the field is where it's really hard to see somebody like him go. Obviously, he's one of the only players I can think of that is just universally loved within the footballing community. I mean, you won't find a player or a fan for that matter that has anything to say about Son Heung-min, right? It comes out that he felt this decision was best for the club just as much as it was best for him. And I agree. Financially, it's insane that what we paid for Sonny is what we got back for Sonny from LAFC, right? That is just absolutely bonkers. So he put the club first, as we would expect after we've come to know Sonny. Just a wonderful guy, and I did have the pleasure of meeting Sonny in LA in 2018, I think, if I'm not mistaken. 19. Whatever.
I think it was 19.
I think it was 18.
I think it was 19. I think it was 18 or 19. It was definitely one of those. Yeah, I was around for one of those U.S. trips too on the West Coast.
Yeah.
I remember you posting about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 19, but had the honor of meeting Sonny, and just in my 5 seconds with him, everything was affirmed, from what we see through various screens. So just couldn't say enough good things about Sonny. Couldn't say enough about what he did for the footballing community, Tottenham community. I would say the Asian footballing community, most importantly, right? There are a lot more, little boys and girls in South Korea who believe they can do monumental things after having watched Son Heung-min play, right? And so I doubt there were very many people believing they could go win the Golden Boot in the Premier League, before Son Heung-min did that. Folks from his country. So yeah, I would honestly say the third most impactful, popular worldwide footballer on the planet after Messi and Ronaldo is probably Son Heung-min at this point in time. And it's insane to think that he played for Spurs for a decade, right?
I was really heartened by that, what you just said there, like the global reaction, the not just with media, but fans as well to this move. Like I not that I wouldn't have expected it for a player like Sonny, but I guess as Spurs fans, we all kind of think that our players somewhat get overlooked, in the grand scheme of the footballing world. And it was really cool to see all of the attention from national and international media outlets, but also national and international fans just kind of praising this departure and the way it all went down. It's funny you bring up being on vacation and kind of missing some of it, Scott, because I was in the same boat last week. As people who were watching the pod on YouTube the last few weeks know, like I've been traveling for about 2.5 weeks. I'm back home now, but all the announcement and the official word that this move had came down while I was traveling last week, and made it to an airport and started watching the content in the airport lounge and realized like I was going to need a second. And I was sitting there in an airport lounge watching this stuff on my phone and tearing up. And, it was, I was not even embarrassed about it because I was just like kind of in my own little world, but it was just like, man, this is a moment that I'm going to, like, I'll always remember where I was when I saw that video and saw, the message to the other players, and some of the interviews that he did about his relationship with Ben Davis and being the godfather to his kids. And it all just really, really hit me. And I was, like I said, I was kind of in the same boat. I was putting off kind of consuming all of this and really breathing it in until I did. And then when I did, it was a lot to take in. And I know, Caroline, it was probably the same for you. What did you take in from all this content that we got in this past week, and just kind of the final farewell?
Yeah, I do think the fact that he was just kind of universally loved is really important to note, because it's not just Tottenham players who have wished him well. It's all across the football world. But I also, found it very emotional just reading the messages from his teammates, because so many of them expressed that, he was basically like a mentor to them, and, he's left like this lasting impact on their careers. And, luckily for us who are Spurs fans, we'll get to see that play out in those players at Tottenham. But Ben Davis's message was really a tearjerker because, just the way that he talked about, son being the godfather to his son. And, this is two people from like opposite ends of the world who became best friends. And, we often say like, it's just a game. What really matters is everything else around the sport. And I feel like that's a good example of that. So
it's a perfect example of it. It's not just the footballing world too. Like I saw videos on the LAFC side of like Magic Johnson and Will Ferrell and all these people welcoming him to the. It's cool that like there's that kind of impact for this too. And part of that is that it's LA and it's a massive city and a massive fan base for an MLS team. That's a really cool part of this as well. Scott, you mentioned kind of the reports too about when this decision was actually made. It sounds like Sonny had been thinking about this for quite a while. It sounds like it really goes all the way back to almost January, where there was offers that were going to be coming in from Barcelona and from some of the Saudi clubs, and he didn't really want to go that route right away. And like you said, just that mindset of team first and how I want to leave. And it all is kind of, I hate to use the cliche of like storybook, but that's kind of what it did become with Spurs obviously going on to lift a trophy with him as captain and him being able to say, this isn't for me anymore. I need a new challenge and a new project as he's kind of going to get ready to be in the World Cup. By the way, to that reporter in LA, not for the United States. He will still play for South Korea. That was an awkward moment from the last week. He will still play for South Korea in the World Cup next year. But all of that being kind of planned out and unfolding in the way that it did, I just thought was, like I said, it was storybook. It was very poetic and just a nice way for it all to end. Much nicer than previous players have departed as well, which is I think we all knew that was going to be the case, but it was just really, really prevalent here.
Yeah, this is the last time I can remember someone leaving Spurs and no one's angry or mad or upset with the club or upset with the player. And after winning the Europa League, you have to go. I mean, you don't even have to factor in the financial implications of not leaving on a free, right? But he's leaving at the very top. I mean, we're not winning the Champions League this year. We're not winning the Premier League this year. It was time for Sonny to walk away. I think you always want to leave something in a better place than you found it, and he absolutely leaves this club in a much better place than he found it, regardless of what happened last year, right? We won a European trophy. So it just made so much sense for him to leave at this time. He turned down a move to Napoli, which I love. I can only suspect that's because he doesn't want to compete against Spurs this season, right? I think he's just ready to be done with his European adventure and move on to new pastures, which he would have cooked for Conte at Napoli. I'm just going to say it, right? But I appreciate him not ending up there. And obviously, as you mentioned, Andrew, he turns down moves to Saudi Arabia, which is now reported, and that makes too much sense. I mean, I would never have expected Son to be open to being part of that sports watching project, right? So it makes a lot of sense. I think, again, Sonny, and I think people understand this, but Sonny is just a mega superstar. Like, he can't go anywhere without everyone knowing who he is. He's on billboards in SeaTac, right? For like Rolex ads and stuff. He is just a mega superstar. Like I said, Messi, Ronaldo, Son Heung-min. I really believe that as far as global superstars in the sport of soccer. So you start thinking about MLS because you're in American markets, like that his type of fame matches New York or LA, right? And I think that there's now reports coming out that LA wasn't his first choice when it came to MLS clubs. I mean, who knows, right? But Sonny seems like a New York City guy to me, and so I feel like maybe it's true that he was really pushing for a move to New York, but I think LA suits his global superstardom just fine, and he'll do really, really well out there.
I think LA is a great fit. I mean, there's a huge Korean population there, and he gets to go play with his old friend Hugo Lloris, which is nice. I mean, I also it took me a second to remember the little bust up they had at that one point a few seasons ago, and I saw a video of that again, and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I kind of love that there's like a poetic rejoining there too, and even in the match against Chicago that we just saw on Saturday, it was like, oh, Hugo makes a big save on one end, and then Sonny's bursting past everyone on the other end and drawing a penalty. And it was like, wow, that could have happened 4 or 5 years ago in N17. It was very kind of mind blowing, but really, really cool to see. So I mean, I don't know what else there is to say other than thank you to Son Heung-min. It was just it was a delight and a pleasure to watch him over the course of a decade, and obviously, lifting a trophy, it made it all so worth it. The other news this week that we got confirmed, which we kind of also knew about last week, is that of James Madison, and the ACL tear is confirmed. It sounds like he's going to miss the entirety of the season. It's devastating. There's no other real way to put it. It's a devastating blow for this guy who was injured at the tail end of last season, had made his way back to, rehab all this summer and got himself back. And then same knee just blows out. And it leaves, it leaves a massive, massive hole in this squad right now in that, central attacking midfield space, especially because we don't really know when Dejan Kulusevski is going to be back either. I've read everything from it could be early September to it could be late November, early December. And I think we don't know. And that's the kind of injury too, that, it can linger and it can take time, even once it's healed, to rehab your way back from. So I think this is the biggest priority for Spurs. And I think that's a massive problem, because if I know that, many other people know that as well. And with the transfer market only being open for another 3 weeks, the clock is ticking for Spurs to be able to get some reinforcements in here. Without going too deep into like the transfer side of it, Scott, like where is the creativity from this midfield coming from? Because there are a lot of goals missing, goal contributions missing, not only with the departure of Sonny, but with Madison, Kulusevski down right now. I'm a little worried, especially because the season starts in just a handful of days.
Yeah, I mean, from a transfer perspective, anything that's like officially reported is about an attacking midfielder. And these aren't even like pulled from tweets. These are actually established sources that are reporting these things. But from what I'm seeing, and this is from Good Morning America. This is from Give Me Sport. They're reporting the Spurs have had a 40 million euro bid for Nico Paz rejected, which I think would be a fun signing, but very young, very unproven. It would be very Johan Longa. I'm not quite sure that we need someone that young and unestablished right now at this point in time after James Madison goes down. I read this morning from the same source, Give Me Sport, 43 million euro bid rejected from Barcelona for Ferran Torres yesterday or into this morning, right? So that would be better than Nico Paz, I would say, right? But still a young player for sure. Maybe not that young. Non-Premier League proven, we could say. Same Give Me Sport says that Frank has green-lighted a move for Eze. Now that's the one player that I think could step in and fill James Madison's shoes pretty quickly from all the links that we're seeing. I think he's your ready-made cam, Premier League proven, and I mean balled out in the Premier League proven, right? That's
the one for me.
Yeah,
that's the one for me for sure. But that's the problem. That is such a hard deal to actually get done, just because not only is it within the Premier League, it's within London. Not only is it a player that had been linked with Arsenal earlier this summer, and the release clause we know was there, but is now expired, and it's going to cost a lot. And I'm not saying that Spurs shouldn't pay that, but it's one of those moves that you are going to have to pay a pretty penny to complete and really invest in a player. And it's going to be purely out of desperation at this point, which puts Spurs, it doesn't put Spurs in a great negotiating place whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, my gut would say that, we've had these types of moves lined up for a while, and after Morgan Gibbs White collapses and now Madison goes down, you start scrambling. So you've got good data and a plan that was probably not for the right now ready to go. And I'm sure Eze's at the top of that list, but Eze has said he prefers a move to Arsenal himself, right? And Arsenal look in the more pole position to land him than we do. Now, the only saving grace is the speculation that going to Arsenal before the World Cup next summer might not be the best move. They're going to have a lot of competition for places, and I don't think you are the guy if you go to Arsenal. I think if you go to Spurs, you are. Also, if you stay at Palace, you are very much the person. So I think if I'm Eze and I'm thinking about the World Cup, I'm staying tight at Palace. I mean, that's a very easy decision, right? But we'll see what happens. He's got to be at the top of the list. And then Give Me Sport also says that we have shown interest in McAtee and are willing to pay $40 million to City for James McAtee, who would be another young player. Now has played fairly well in his cameos in the Premier League, right? But very young. So yeah, on that list, Eze's the only guy, like you said. And then I did read that we are showing interest, whatever that means, from Give Me Sport for Carlos Baleba, that midfielder from Brighton, who everyone's trying to pay like $120 million for right now. So yeah, we'll see. If I would highly assume that's just fodder for the press, right? But I think all those other names are concrete bids, right? Or Eze, not a concrete bid yet, but I would expect one to be forthcoming.
And all of this to say, we'll probably end up with Jack Grealish about 6 or 7 years too late. Caroline, yep. What is the solution in the central midfield? Because we talked about this a little bit last week. I don't see one within the squad. Lucas Bergvall isn't that guy. Pap Sarr isn't that guy. There's just not enough creativity in some of these midfielders that we have. While I like them in other roles, and I like the depth that we have in the midfield, there's just one glaring spot.
Right. And the issue now is that we don't just need one player for this position. I feel like we need to bring in two. And that could be a situation where maybe that second player is Jack Grealish on a loan. And it doesn't feel ideal at this point in his career, but it might be, kind of a necessity because he would represent, another homegrown player at least. Not club trained, obviously. But yeah, it's just a tough situation to be in, like you said, because we're now in really crunch time with the season starting in less than a week. And we have to have this player come in, like whoever it ends up being. We can't go months of the season waiting for Decky to come back, especially knowing that it could take him some time to ramp up. He usually tends to be pretty slow to come back from injury. So we're really just in a tough situation here. And it's kind of concerning too, in the sense that I feel like we're playing a similar kind of game of chicken, no pun intended, with the center back position, because we've also got, Takai, who's come in and he's injured to start. So if we get into another situation where we've got injuries early on in the center back ranks, we're going to be scrambling there. So there's a lot to be done, I think. And as we know, left back is also an issue now because of Udogi's sort of perennial injury concerns. So,
and it's interesting too, because, Thomas Frank has made it pretty clear that Spurs are not in the market for another fullback.
Which I think is a mistake.
Well, and it's tied with Ben Davis. I mean, it sounds like Ben Davis is going to be that backup, left back, which in an Ange system, definitely not. In a Frank system, okay, I can squint and see it, because you can kind of play that lopsided role and send Porro on the right side up further and almost ostensibly play a back three with Davis, sliding back. But it is concerning to me on the center back realm as well, just because the Takai thing, the plantar fasciitis thing that's kind of like the Kulusevski injury. It's a mystery. You don't know when that's going to come back. You don't know when there could be a flare up with it. I would certainly not count on him stepping into any kind of significant role anytime soon. And then there are reports that just this week, just today, in fact, that Luka Vuskovic is actually going to go on loan. It sounds like to the Bundesliga, to Hamburg, which I think is a great move personally. Like he rocked it in the Belgian league. Sure, let's step up to Germany and see what you can do there, especially for a newly promoted side where you feel like he could step in and give them a boost. I'm fully on board with that part, especially when it comes to a long-term development side for an 18-year-old. I don't need him, playing significant minutes in the Premier League this season. I'd rather see him in the Bundesliga, but that will leave Spurs short on that end too. If, Takai is not able to make it back, and God forbid you suffer an injury with Van de Ven, Romero, or Danso. And we all know Dragusin is still working his way back, and there's no real clear timetable on him as well. So it's like the injury crisis just has continued from last season, it feels, and we're still kind of dragging our way through. And with the window being open, you feel like that's the opportunity to solve some problems, but Spurs still have a lot of problems to solve. Getting back to the attacking midfield spot, is there any validity from either of you guys to Wilson Odobert, Matisse Tell, Mohamed Kudus, kind of shifting it? Because there do seem to be a lot of attacking players that could maybe shift back a little bit into the more central role and provide some of that creativity, and guys who have done it in fits and starts during their career. I don't know if that's an option, because you can only play three across the front. and there's going to be a little bit of depth there. Do one of those guys is there a shot for one of those guys to maybe step in and fill in some of these minutes?
I mean, I definitely think there's room for experimentation, which we even saw a little bit at the end of last season with Odebear, and I didn't hate what I saw from him in that position. And with Tell, I'm trying to remember if he played sort of in a sort of midfield role often in Bayern, and I don't think he really did. But he is someone who, even when he's playing on the wing, likes to cut in and get involved in the center of the pitch. So, I mean, this is someone who played with Thomas Muller for a couple of seasons, so he's probably picked up a few tricks. I don't know. It'd be worth a try. Just because, like you said, the other midfielders that we have, it's not that they don't have good qualities, but that sort of eye for creating chances is not really one of them. So
they're more dribbly boys, not more passy boys. We need
yes.
we need a passy boy, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Honestly, I think Odebear could do it if he needed to, and I think Kudus could too. I think Kudus is your best winger at this point in time, quite handily, I think, and I wouldn't be removing him from the wing. Odebear is probably your second best winger at this point in time, right? So I also probably wouldn't be removing him from the wing. I don't, like Caroline said, Tell can probably do something there, but he's not the mold for that role, right? So what I'm getting at is, if we don't go out and get someone who can step into that role right away, I think we're in trouble, and that would be very like old Spurs to me, right? Just looking to find solutions that are already there as opposed to just taking care of business. So yeah, we really need to bring somebody in, and if you bring anybody in other than Eze, you have no chance of doing anything against PSG. And I think the club probably feels that at this point in time. So this is going to be really big, in my opinion, next 48 hours as to what happens with him. Community Shield's over. We'll learn a lot more there, but something has to happen. And I will say too, I'm not as concerned with the fullback position as I would say the majority of the Tottenham Hotspur world, right? I think when you look at the fact that you've got Poro, obviously, but on the right side, as well as Archie Gray as a backup, and then Spence as your left back, and Davies as your backup, and then knowing that Udogie comes back and Gray can play either side, I think, sure, I'd love to buy someone there, but I think our priorities have to be center back and central attacking mid if we're going to be prepared for this season. So we'll see.
I agree with you on the fullback side of things for the exact reasons you mentioned. You have a few guys who can, between Gray and Davis, who can fill different roles and fill spots, and Spence is good on either side. And I do think that there's enough bodies there, but man, one or two injuries and it's just, you're right back to square one. And that's the scary part. And
and I think we're also
the playing style is going to be different too. So hopefully the injury, load can be lessened a little bit, but you just never know.
Yeah. You beat me to it. I was going to say, like, this is not a dig at Ange, but we will be playing with more than two defenders this season. And I think that will have a massive impact on the performance and sustainability of the fullback position. Right. So yeah, not concerned.
Yeah. I don't think the strain is going to be as much on the fullbacks as it was the past two seasons. Like, Poro is probably feeling a huge sense of relief right now.
Yeah, for sure.
He needed a little bit of a break.
Well, not only that, but Poro will if they are playing, if they happen to be playing Ben Davis on the left side, like, and that situation does arise where Poro is just going to be able to get way up the pitch, like that sounds like fun. Like Poro crossing balls in and feeding. Hell, maybe Poro ends up being the creativity in the midfield by just getting way up the pitch. Like, that's, at this point, you got to throw some shit at the wall and hope that it's
honestly, all jokes aside. Honestly, all jokes aside, if you do set up that tactically that way, it lets Kudus drop into the middle and actually become more of a creative presence if Poro's bombing down the right. So it's interesting, but just sign a 10. Like, let's not start tactically helping the team determine how they don't need to buy a 10. Exactly.
Spurs did obviously wrap up the preseason late last week with a trip to Bayern Munich. I know Scott and I did not watch this match. As we mentioned, we were both away out of town, but Caroline, I know you had a very vested interest as these are your two clubs. And it did not go well for Spurs. It was a 4-0 defeat. Harry Kane scored a goal against his former club, and then badly missed a penalty moments later, which I did seem to witness, and that was fun. There was part of me when I first saw it that was like, oh, he did that on purpose, but then I realized he just slipped and the ball just went sailing into Rosed, which is totally fine. It was nice. The whole Kane thing was nice, and there was a nice little, he got to see some former players and gave some quotes to the club to put on their website, and all of that was fine and dandy. But the match itself, Caroline, what did we learn, if anything? I think you told us before we started recording that there was a lot more to be learned from Bayern than Spurs in this one. But what did we learn, in that respect from Spurs?
Well, from the Spurs perspective, we need to be concerned about those long range shots defending. That was really a big vulnerability. And I mean, Bayern has the kind of players who are capable of that. So that's one factor. But yeah, that was really kind of concerning. And I will say the first goal, from Harry was offside. And that was uncharacteristically bad refereeing from a German referee, because I always say that watching the Bundesliga is very refreshing because you don't usually have controversial refereeing decisions. But he was pretty bad, I have to say. And I was muted just now when you were talking about the penalty that Harry missed, but I was cackling just the way that I did when it happened in real time.
Oh, I did too. And I saw it. I was like, oh, that's pretty funny.
It was quite satisfying to see that happen. I'm not going to lie.
Well, it's also something we're not used to seeing at all. Like,
shocking just in general.
So good on pens.
Exactly.
And that was wild.
Yeah. But, and then there was also, the Polina factor, newly arrived from Bayern, only on loan, of course. He did not have a good first game. I don't think he looked pretty rusty. And I continue to have concerns about how that's going to work out, especially with, the Madison of it all, leaving that gaping hole in the front of the midfield. But yeah, it was just very clear that Bayern won the midfield battle, which was a relief to me as a Bayern fan, because I was concerned about how that was going to work with Musiala out for a good chunk of the season. But I felt like Elise was very clearly the best player on the pitch in this game, and I feel like he's going to be a contender for Bundesliga Player of the Year at this point. But that being said, I felt like Jed did a really good job of trying to neutralize him as much as possible, because I feel like, we really need to see Jed have sort of not a breakout season, because I guess he already had that under Ange, but like really more production, I would say. We just need a little bit more from him. So yeah, it was a game that I was sadly expecting Tottenham to lose, just because Bayern are way farther ahead in preparations, just because they've not had as much squad turnover. One of the players they brought in, they had already integrated during the Club World Cup, Jonathan Tah. So it really looked like we were the team that was not as cohesive, and the chemistry just wasn't there for Spurs. So I don't feel like this was a result we needed to panic about, and I feel like a lot of people were panicking, which to each their own. But to me, it wasn't like going to tell us anything about Spurs that we didn't already know, which is that we desperately need a number 10, and we've got a new number 6 who's only played so many minutes with the team at this point. So yeah,
it's certainly going to take time. And I when I saw the result, I certainly didn't scoff at it or panic at all, in the same way that I didn't jump for joy when I saw that we had beaten Arsenal 1-0. Like, these preseason matches, they're friendlies. They don't count, obviously. They're important for other reasons. They're important for what you mentioned there, the cohesiveness, the getting used to playing with new players that are coming in, and the fitness side of it. And I think the Spurs have played enough games now in this preseason that the fitness side of it should not be an issue, especially with the amount of games that they're going to play here in the first few weeks, starting with that Super Cup match on Wednesday in Italy against PSG. That's obviously, I go into that match, honestly, kind of the way I would have looked at the Bayern match. Like, hope to hold on for dear life, expect to probably lose it 3 or 4-0, and go on from there. Anything else would be a delight for me and would be wonderful. before we get really into like season preview stuff, I do want to mention there were a lot of loans that were finalized this week, and we talked about this last week. The list of players that were probably going to go out on loan. I'll just bring them up here. Alfie Devine not only went on loan, signed a new contract before he did so, which is a good move, but goes out on loan to Preston North End. Youngmin Hyuk goes to Portsmouth in the Championship. Jamie Donnelly to Stoke City in the Championship, and Will Lancashire to Oxford United in the Championship. Two other ones, Tyrese Hall goes to Notts County in League Two. George Abbott to Wickham Wanderers in League One. That's we just saw them a few weeks ago in that closed door friendly. So those are all the loans that have been confirmed. And I mentioned earlier, Vuskovic looks like he's close to a loan to head over to Hamburg in the Bundesliga. There's also reportedly a move right now for Spurs' second longest tenured player behind Ben Davis. Do you guys know who that is offhand?
It's yes, Brian Hill.
Freaking Hill. Brian Hill is reportedly working on a move to Bologna. It would be a loan with an option, potentially an obligation if certain conditions are met. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but like prayer hands emoji that it does, because that is a move that definitely needs to happen. Brian Hill needs to move on. This has been going on for far too long. So that's kind of the outgoing loan / reportedly loan roundup. I don't know that there's much else to say from that standpoint of things, but I did want to talk to you guys about just the season writ large real quick before we get out of here today, because it's here. Like, the previews are out and everybody's, Scott, you mentioned it, Community Shield, Crystal Palace this morning defeating Liverpool for the Community Shield, which is obviously cool to see, but everything kind of gets rolling this week. Spurs will play in the Super Cup on Wednesday and then come right back and open it up at home against Burnley on Saturday in the Premier League opener for the season. And I kind of just want to get a feel for what we're expecting from our club this season, because I looked at some predictions and was a little surprised that most of the quote unquote experts are picking Spurs somewhere in that 6 to 8 range, which is wild to me because I don't know that we are a top half of the table club at this point with all the things that we've been talking about, the midfield holes, the depth issues. There's just a lot to be desired still for me with this club, even though there is going to be Champions League football on the horizon as well. Scott, are you as confident in some of the expert predictions in 6th, 7th, maybe 8th place in the Premier League this season, or does that seem lofty to you?
It seems a little lofty. I think it's possible, but maybe not probable. Now we know supercomputers have picked us much lower than that too, right? So there's a wide range of things that could happen, of course. I think we have a lot of holes in our squad still. I do think we have probably the 3rd and 7th best center back in the league, and they're paired together, right? So that's a really strong piece of our squad. But beyond that, I could start poking holes, I think, in everything else, right? I question elements of Vicario. I question elements of Pedro Porro. I question elements of Udogie. I think our midfield is in shambles right now. We've really relied on Pop Sarr, and I love Pop Sarr, but we need more than that, right? I think you've got a Bergwall who's very young. You've got a João Palhinha who hasn't had a great past 18 months and is, aging from a footballing perspective. At striker, I have a lot of questions about both Solanke and Richarlison, and I don't say that in a negative way, but I think they're incomplete strikers in their own regards, right? And you have Mohamed Kudus on the wing, and that's kind of it, right? And when I say these things, I'm talking the level required to do the things that Daniel Levy is talking about wanting to do in interviews and stuff, right? We're a squad that needs a lot of work, and we've, I think, been mismanaged in some sense, right? We've bought a lot of talented players who are all super young, and that's a very long-term decision to make, right? And football doesn't really work that way anymore. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But I would guess us to finish 8th or 9th would be my prediction. and then everything else is a toss-up. I think we do get into the round of 32 in the Champions League, maybe get through the round of 32, but I doubt it. No, certainly no further than that. And then the two domestic cups are just honestly a coin flip at this point. You never know what's going to happen week to week, and if you find yourself in a quarterfinal, then anything can happen, right? So there's always a chance there. But for me, that's why Wednesday becomes even so much more important for me, is snag a European trophy on the way into what's going to be a pretty dicey year, and it might not be as dicey as it actually seems when it's all said and done.
Yeah, the only saving grace for Wednesday for me is that PSG obviously were participating in Club World Cup this summer and have not had a massive time off or ramp up period. So maybe you can catch them off guard in that sense, but PSG are an absolute wagon. And that's, you said it earlier, the task is a mountain climb. Caroline, where are you at with this? Because like Scott alluded to, there are some supercomputers out there, specifically Opta, which has us out of their 10,000 simulations of the Premier League season, the average finish for Spurs is 14th, which, hey, is 3 spots better than last year, but it's still pretty shitty.
Well, I'll say right off the bat, I'm definitely not feeling that pessimistic about our season to think we're going to finish 14th. I think that is definitely way too far down the table. I do agree with Scott that the game against PSG, the Super Cup, is a good opportunity for us to sort of set the tone regardless of the result. I think we just want to see a good effort and some actual, thought behind the tactics. Want to see Frank being, reactive to the moment, which was always a big issue with me with Ange, just that he was not always quick enough to react in games. So that's what I'm hoping to see on Wednesday. I know that's like a negative thing to say right after we've won a European trophy, but I do think we have to do some expectations management as fans this season and recognize that we never left the rebuild. If anything, we have gone a couple steps back with Son leaving and, basically the next most senior player out for God knows how long. We're just going to have to accept that this is going to be a season of figuring things out, developing, like you said, the really young core of players that we have who do have a lot of potential. Like I think in long term, I feel positive about this team. So that's what I'm kind of holding on to. And I'm going to try really, really hard not to get bogged down in individual results and just try to see the big picture. Because I do think we're building towards something, but it is going to take some time. And I don't think that time is going to be this season probably. And, if we manage to get a domestic cup, I think that would be a wonderful end to the season. I'm not expecting anything in terms of Champions League really, or the league finish.
Yeah, I'm certainly with you guys on the league finish. I mean, I certainly would see us if you can get into the top half. I think that is a pretty not lofty goal, but a good goal and a good place to set the bar. And if you can then make a run at an FA Cup or even a League Cup, and even just getting to a final in one of those would I think be significant for this club. And Caroline, what you say about some of the potential really hits for me too. There's still a lot of young players in this team that the club bought in the last year or two under Ange that we want to see kick on and do good things. I'm talking about the likes of Wilson Odobert, of Jed Spence, Lucas Bergvall, Archie Gray. There are so many names that I really think have the potential to blossom and start to really, experience some really good times in the Premier League if they can get on the pitch and stay healthy and all of those things. The ancillary pieces, the Polinas and Ben Davis, like these are the veterans that you need to sprinkle into a team like this. And I think Spurs still need to do a little bit more of that. Not only just from a depth standpoint, but just to get things over the line. But I am cautiously optimistic that this club can be better than it was last season. And I know that's not saying a lot considering they finished one spot above the relegation zone, but from a Premier League standpoint, it's going to be challenging because of all of the other things that are going to need to be balanced. What about the rest of the league? What do you guys, I think there are 3 teams that are being considered in the race right now for the title. I think we all know who those 3 are, but you could maybe throw a 4th in there in Chelsea. I've heard Chelsea's name bandied about as a long shot, but we all know it's the champions Liverpool, it's the scum Arsenal, and it's Manchester City as kind of a, hey, we're still here too, even though they had a terrible season last year. Personally, I think that Manchester City will bounce back, and I kind of see them as returning to the top, perhaps, but it's anybody's game, really. I certainly don't think Arsenal are going to do it. I think they are perennial second place finishers. But what is your guys' outlook on the top of the table and the Premier League champion this year?
I hate saying that I may disagree a little bit that Arsenal can't get it done. I do worry that is a possible universe that we walk into this next season. I think they have improved dramatically in the signings of Zubamende and Gyökeres. Gyökeres, I still think the jury's out on a little bit, but in Zubamende, there's no jury required. That guy just very, very good midfielder. And if they continue to pad themselves up top, they've got a great defense, and yeah, it could get dicey. I agree with you. City's going to be a team that will push for the title for sure. I think Ryan Cherky is super talented, and I think he can step into that De Bruyne gap pretty handily. So, yeah, I think City will be good. Obviously going to say that Liverpool will be very good. I won't say much more than that. And then I do actually rate Chelsea to push for a Premier League title this season too. I actually think they're really good. I think they maybe have the best midfield in the league, just kind of quietly, right? When you look at I'm going to be not even remember either of their names, right? But Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez behind Cole Palmer, I think it's a really spicy midfield, and João Pedro looks to be the real deal up top for them. So yeah, anyways, I just sat here and talked for 2 minutes about Chelsea and Arsenal, and I feel like I need
to shower.
But,
yeah, exactly.
But that's the world that we're currently living in, unfortunately.
Well, I'll just say I recognize this is my Bundesliga bias coming in, but I feel like with the business that Liverpool did in the transfer window, they've got to be repeat champions, and anything less than that would be disappointment for them, I think, because they've been really smart about their moves. I'm excited to see Florian Wirtz, especially in the Premier League, because he's, a young player who's just got so much talent. And even Ekatike, I mean, we know from when we played Frankfurt, like he's also a massive talent. So, yeah, I think they're going to win the title. After that, I don't know. I'm just kind of waiting to see if like the majority of the, sort of big teams are like going to finally get it together. Because I feel like the last few seasons, there's just been a lot of variability and not consistency from the teams who are supposed to be sort of the standard bearers. And obviously Tottenham, we want to be part of that conversation. I'm not sure if we're still going to be in that conversation at this point. I don't know.
The 2 Europa League finalists are right in the middle of that conversation. Spurs and United are like, what's going on? And,
it's been a weird time. So I think, obviously it's not a bad thing to have other teams challenging. Like, I think what Crystal Palace is doing is pretty exciting, just from like a fan of the league perspective. You want to see other teams, actually capable of competing. And honestly, I think Eze should stay there. like if I were him making that decision, I'd be like, I'm going to stick with my team and follow where this ride goes. But
he has always thrived as the big fish in the small pond, and that's exactly where he has been.
Well, kind of like Grealish, he moved and that did not work out for him. So I would hate to see that to happen to him.
Imagine if he had kicked on at Villa and where they would potentially be right now. Like you're exactly right. Like that is the spot. And I totally agree with you on Liverpool. Like it is amazing the job that they've done in transitioning from Jurgen Klopp to Arne Slot and the just the way that they have supplemented their squad and made interesting. There's been interesting departures. I mean, the Darwin Nunez thing like kind of took me by surprise, but also I was like, Well, no, I guess that kind of does make sense. Like it's just another bit of smart business for them to cash in and continue the churn, and that's what good clubs do, and that's what Liverpool has done. I agree with you though too. As much as I don't want to say that it's exciting that all of these teams that aren't Spurs are in contention, it is kind of nice to go into a season. I mean, Liverpool were the third betting favorite to win the title last year, and they did. This season, you come in and it's like, okay, Liverpool are favored, but you've got Arsenal, you've got City, you've maybe got Chelsea. Like it is kind of, and the top 4, 5, 6, you don't really know who's going to pop in there. And that does kind of make just watching the league at large a lot more entertaining than some of these other leagues where it's going to be one or two clubs that win the title. Here there's a little bit more of a wide brush to paint with in the Premier League, and I think that does make for exciting times. It's just unfortunately not going to be Spurs. On the other end of the table, I know everyone's going to be favoring the three newly promoted sides to go right back down. Burnley, Leeds, Sunderland. Any other choices? Do we think any of those three can stay up, or do we think there's another team that is more of a threat to go down? I kind of tend to lean toward maybe like a Brentford or a Wolves slipping down there. We've seen those teams kind of flirt, but I would probably expect the same three that came up to go right back down, just like what happened last season. Any other thoughts on that, Scott?
I think Leeds might stay up. Actually, I think they could do that. I'm very curious to see what Sunderland does too. They've spent some decent money this summer. Obviously, they sold Joe Bellingham, which helps. That also begs questions as to what the team will look like, right? But
Right.
I could see them being somewhat sneaky. I expect Burnley to go down, unfortunately, for Scotty Parker. And I would say that I agree with you. I think Wolves or Brentford are the likely choice if it's not Leeds to go back down. I think poor Brentford is just, if Wisa leaves, they're taking a beating with their manager and Norgard and again potentially Wisa and Mbuemo's now at United. So I think they could struggle. I'm not saying they will, but they could. And then can Wolves just get relegated? Like we've been playing this game for 3 seasons now.
And Wolves is such a damn bogey team for Spurs too. That's the problem. Like we always seem to lose a game against them every season and draw the other. The Wolves is like, I agree with you. They're such a pain in the ass to play against because they just have this voodoo around them that Spurs seem to struggle with. So I would love to see them relegated as well, only for that reason. Not because I have anything against them, but just because they seem to pick on Spurs.
Well, and when I first became a Spurs fan, West Ham were terrible. And every season I'm like waiting for them to get back to that point where they're like perennially in trouble of relegation. So that would be nice. I honestly don't know what they've been up to this summer. Like,
had a rough summer.
That's great. Good to hear. But
they'll probably be on the verge of that.
Yeah.
They're more of like a 14, 15, 16 to me than a 17, 18, 19, 20, but who knows?
I do agree with Scott though. Like out of the newly promoted teams, I think Leeds are probably the best suited to staying up. Like I've become kind of a casual follower of Sunderland for reasons I think I've discussed in the past, and I don't feel so great about the business they did this summer. I mean, they brought in Granit Xhaka, who obviously has huge experience, and it's like, I guess, good to have a villain back in the Premier League that we're familiar with. But he's also 32 years old now, so I don't know how long, his effectiveness is going to last. So, and I think letting Bellingham go was a big mistake. So I don't feel very good about them staying up.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned Burnley. That is, of course, the first Premier League opponent for Spurs next Saturday at home. That is the Premier League opener. And I think that's I don't want to say a more important game than Wednesday, because obviously there's a trophy on the line on Wednesday, but it is really imperative that Spurs get off to a good start against a newly promoted Burnley on Saturday, because if you stumble in that one, you're just immediately going to hear a lot of negativity out of this fan base. And I'm not ready for that. I'm not prepared for that on match week 1. So I've also seen the meme going around is that of course Spurs are going to win on Wednesday 1-0 against PSG. Then they're going to lose 1-0 to Burnley. And then they're going to turn around week 2 and go to City and win 1-0. Like that would be the Spurs thing to do, is for it to go that way. But I would really like to see them get off to a good start against Burnley in the Premier League, and that starts on Saturday. And I just think that's really, really crucial. So we'll have to see how that all plays out.
I got 2 questions for you guys before we wrap up here on our boy Sonny. These are not going to be like Todd type end of pod questions either, so don't stress. But
thank goodness.
When it comes to Sonny, I think Sonny for me has 3. There's 3 core moments that really stick out of his decade. It's the Puskas goal, obviously, which shout to Sonny. That happened on my wedding in South Africa, the morning of my wedding in South Africa. So that's always a big moment.
I think I remember. That's true. That's good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. The morning of. The second moment is, do you know who I am against City, right? When he grabbed the camera and said, do you know who I am? And then the third moment is lifting the Europa League trophy, right? So which of those 3 stands out to both of you more? Like, what's your favorite moment of those 3?
For me, it's the Champions League against City, because that was so, during that whole run. And I think this needs to be said too. Like, Spurs for so many years relied on the goal scoring of Harry Kane, obviously. But when Harry Kane wasn't there, Heung-min Son was always there. And that's so, that was just so poignant for me in looking back at all of these, because during that Champions League run, Harry Kane wasn't there. He wasn't there until the final. But Heung-min Son was there. And obviously Lucas Moura and there were other pieces there as well. But Heung-min Son in that tie against City was the dude. And he put the team completely on his back and carried them. And that, for me, was really a moment. Obviously the Puskas is great. And I always point to the goal he scored against Chelsea going down the right side as well as one that just, like, you just don't see that kind of stuff happen. You don't see someone be able to turn on the afterburners in the way that he did. And it was the same for the Puskas goal as well against Burnley. It's just, you don't see human beings be able to do what he's able to do with the ball at his feet and then execute in all the other ways that he needs to execute. But in the end, for me, it's the Champions League, just because of the magnitude of the moment and the stage. And he stepped up in such a big way in those games.
Well, I feel like I should say the trophy lift, because that was what his entire Spurs career was building to. But, like I talked about in the moment back in May, like, to me, that was more of like a moment of just like relief. But when I think about the moment that was actually the most exciting Sonny moment to me, it's against City in a different game. The one on the opener of, gosh, what season was that? Was that 23? 24 maybe?
Was that Nuno?
Yes, it was Nuno, had just come in. Harry was trying to scamper off, and
hadn't yet.
He hadn't yet, and Son had just signed a new contract over the summer and recommitted to Spurs. And then in this first game of the season, he scores this fabulous goal. He completely embarrasses the was it Ruben Dias, I think, that was trying to block him. Sits him down, gets past Ederson. It was, and you could tell in the moment that he was like, yes, I am the man. I am the man for Tottenham. And that one really just stands out to me as the most exciting Sonny moment, because of what it meant, in the wider context. Because I guess I have a petty streak, and I really was just yeah, Harry, take that.
Well, He was trying to leave 2 City as well, and we beat City 1-0 on that.
And that made it even more satisfying.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, just, why do we need Harry Kane? All right, my second question then, it's funny because you both have already kind of bled into the answer to this question, but does Son Heung-min or Harry Kane have a better, deeper legacy at Tottenham Hotspur?
See, this is a question that's been asked a lot this week, and I don't think it's that complicated. You're talking about legacy. It's Son, because of everything that we've talked about. It's the moments. I'm not, as many jokes as we make on this podcast about Harry Kane and the way that he left, and just kind of the awkward nature of who Harry Kane was at Tottenham and has been since he left Tottenham. Harry Kane is still and always will be a Tottenham legend. He's the leading goal scorer. He's one of our own, all of that. But with Sonny, it's different because of kind of what Caroline was just talking about, the commitment to the club, and even everything that's gone on in the last week and the way that he left the club. To me, it couldn't have been more storybook, more poetic. I used all those words earlier when we talked about this as well, but like it's Sonny for me just because when you talk legacy, maybe not best player and certainly didn't score as many goals, but when you talk about legacy and legendary status, he is above Harry Kane in my eyes for all of those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am guilty of being very harsh on Harry on this podcast. I'll admit it. But that's not to say that I never felt joyful moments from his goals or the things that he did on the pitch. Like, I can think of plenty of Harry moments that stand out to me. But I still think it's true that, you know, the way he left the club did tarnish his legacy a bit. And at this point, it feels more like, you know, statistically, he is the greatest Tottenham player. But on an emotional level, it has to be Son. And I'm someone who definitely views sports through that lens of like, I'm watching this to be entertained. I'm watching it to be moved. And Sonny is more so the player that did that at Tottenham for me.
Yeah, I mean, Kane, in my opinion, Kane left to do what Sonny did at Spurs, you know? And this isn't like, I promise this is not a Bayern shot at all, Caroline, but I value a Europa League over a Bundesliga with Bayern. Maybe not a Bundesliga with Leverkusen in the way they did it, right? But I think either way, a Europa League trophy means more, and Sonny again did what Kane left to do, right? And I have a ton of respect for Sonny for that. It's more than goals. And when I say like who's a greater player, I would even say that like the more talented player doesn't mean the greater player, right? So Son, and don't get me wrong, Son is mega talented. I mean, he has a Puskas, he has a Premier League Golden Boot, he has a Europa League, he's got an Asian Cup. The dude is decorated for sure. And when you win the Golden Boot in the Premier League, when you're a goal scorer, like there is nothing more major than winning the Golden Boot in the best league in the world, right? So Sonny is just a mega talented footballer, and as good as Kane was, I don't think there's even like much of a conversation around like, oh, Kane was a better footballer than Son, which he probably was, but I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Harry didn't win Golden Boots either, but when you use the word legacy, that's what stands out to me more. Is legacy means something different than just scoring goals. Legacy means, you know, how are you going to be remembered? And Sonny is going to be remembered as one of the best Tottenham Hotspur players of all time, no matter what happens from here on out. As will Harry Kane, but it's just different, and it's especially different when, as a captain, you lift silverware. And Sonny did that. Harry Kane never did. So it's legacy. That's where that word means a lot, and that's why I lean to Son on that. So it's a good question. It's a good talking point. And it's not that I didn't want to talk about that earlier. I just kind of wanted to praise Son, and but you're right. It's with everything that's gone on and the long, painful rebuild that we've talked about over the years. Like, this does feel finally like a chapter. I know Ben Davis is still around, and of course the long legacy of Brian Heel remains, but this does feel like a closed chapter now. And I am, in a weird way, I am excited to see what comes next for this club without Sonny, because this is kind of what's needed to happen. And now that it has, we can all kick on. So excited for that. Premier League this week, Super Cup this week. Just real quickly before we got out of here, we don't really have anything to talk about on the Spurs women front because nothing's really happened. We've still gotten no word about preseason friendlies. We've got about a month until the season starts. We're getting a ton of content from the training facility and from, you know, workouts, but other than that, no new signings, no new rumors. We did have like a little bit of information about the under-19s playing some preseason matches, but other than that, there's just nothing going on. So if there's nothing going on, I don't know what else there is to say other than sign some damn players and give us some more damn information, because tick. It's you know, things are going to start moving here very quickly. Obviously the men get underway this week, but the women are going to be right behind, and we would like to have something to talk about. but we don't, unfortunately. That's just kind of where we're at. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Tottenham Depot. Be sure to check out our episodes on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. Leave us a rating and review on wherever you listen to this podcast. Please do that. We don't ask for that very often, and also if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe the videos. That really helps in the algorithms. We don't ask for much here. We just ask for that. So if you could give us that would be great. You can also follow us on all the socials at Tottenham Depot. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko. You can follow Scott at Scott G Bird. You can follow me at A Stetka. And again, follow us at Tottenham Depot wherever you are on social media. We will be back next week to talk a lot more, and obviously we'll have some games to talk about and some results to discuss, and we will do that next week. This has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.